A mother was about to say her final goodbye until his chest moved and everything changed. The sun hadn't even risen properly in Phoenix when Laura opened her eyes. The clock on the wall read 6:47. It was the same every day. Get up, make coffee, call Ethan. She slipped on her flip-flops and went to the kitchen. She made coffee and put 2 slices of bread in the toaster, just like she always did. She poured Ethan's glass of milk, and then, with the mug still warm in her hand, she called from the hallway, "Ethan, come on, son, it's time." "Hey, be quiet." She repeated it louder. "Ethan, wake up, sweetheart, you're going to be late." Nothing, not a sound, not even a groan. Laura frowned, put the cup in the sink and walked to her son's room, knocking gently on the door. Ethan opened the door slowly. The light from the hallway spilled into the room. He was lying there on his side, half curled up as if he were still asleep. But something inside her froze. She didn't know what it was. She just felt it. She walked toward him slowly, touched his arm, carefully, cold. His skin was cold. Ethan knelt beside the bed and put his hand on his face. His eyes were half open, not blinking. "My God," her voice came out as a whisper, drowned in fear. "Ethan, son, talk to me." She shook him gently at first, then desperately, "No, don't do this to me, Ethan." She screamed with all her strength. She screamed from the bottom of her soul, as if the floor had been pulled out from under her. Shaking, he grabbed his cell phone and called 911. Unable to breathe properly, "It's my son. He's not moving. He's frozen. Please come. Please." The ambulance arrived quickly, but time seemed to have stopped. The paramedics came in and did what they had to do. Laura stayed by his side, kneeling on the floor, clutching a small rosary she had in her apron pocket. Those minutes felt like years until one of the doctors looked at her, took off his gloves slowly, with a look she would never forget. "Cardiac arrest." "We're so sorry." She didn't understand. It couldn't be. No, he wasn't moving his head. His eyes were wide open. But he was healthy. He was healthy. He was fine yesterday. He laughed. He had dinner with me. He was fine. Her world stopped. The air disappeared. Her chest tightened in a way that hurt physically. She wanted to switch places with him. She wanted to die right there, but all she could do was stare at her son's motionless body on the stretcher and repeat softly, "My boy, my boy." The house that had once been full of life was now filled with screams and silence. Laura's phone was shaking in her hand. Mark's name was flashing on the screen. She didn't answer. She couldn't. She could barely breathe. Sitting on a hard hospital bench, still wearing her coat, her face wet, her hands shaking. She just stared at the floor, waiting for someone to say that it was all a mistake. 15 minutes later, Mark, Ethan's stepfather, appeared in the hallway. He was walking fast, his eyes red, his hair all messy, but there was something strange. It was as if his body was saying one thing and his face was saying another. "Laura," he said quietly, trying not to cry. "They told me, my God." She got up, went to him, and threw herself into his arms. She needed a hug. She needed to not fall apart. He hugged her, but only for a moment. When she tried to look him in the eyes, he looked away. "How did this happen, Mark? How did this happen?" "Yesterday he was fine. He was laughing with us. He played video games, remember? He was fine." Mark ran his hand over his face and said quickly, almost swallowing his words, "Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it was his heart." "Honey, these things happen." She frowned. His heart. But Ethan was strong. He played soccer, swam, ate well, never had anything. Mark took a step back, looked around, scratched the back of his neck. He was sweating even though the hospital air was quite cold, but you never know. Sometimes a person seems fine. And then it happens. Laura grabbed his arm. "Look at me, Mark." He hesitated. His gaze avoided hers as if he were afraid to face something. "Did you see anything yesterday? Did he say anything to you?" Mark shook his head too quickly. "No, nothing." He was quiet. Nothing else. The way he said it. Very dry, very practical, as if he wanted to get the subject over with. She noticed and felt it. It was only a second. But in that second, her heart skipped a beat, as if her body was telling her something's wrong, but she pushed the thought away. She didn't want to think about it now, she just wanted to understand why. She sat back down, ran her hands through her hair and whispered, "My son Mark, our boy. Why?" Mark stood there. He didn't sit down next to her. He didn't hug her again. He just stood there, staring at some point, as if he wanted time to pass quickly. And that was silence from him. It was a silence that did not comfort. It was a silence that weighed heavily. The wake was scheduled to begin at 9 p.m. The body was being taken to the funeral home. She had to leave to prepare the clothes for the wake. Every step inside the house seemed to echo with a painful emptiness. Nothing made sense. The forgotten coffee cup in the sink, Ethan's towel in the bathroom, the flip-flop turned upside down in the corner of the living room. It was as if everything was screaming his absence. She took a deep breath, trying to stay on her feet. She had to prepare her son. The idea of dressing him for the last time broke her heart, but she wanted to do it with love, with care, as she had done when he was little, and she would run her hand through his hair before he left for school. She opened the closet with trembling hands. She grabbed the blue shirt he always wore when he wanted to look his best. It was his favorite. The fabric still smelled of the soft perfume he used. Laura pressed the shirt against her chest, as if she were hugging her son. Oh, my boy. The tears wouldn't stop flowing. She went to the dresser to grab some clean underwear and pants. As she pulled out the first drawer, a loose piece of paper slipped between the clothes and fell to the floor. It made a small sound, but it was enough for her to notice. She bent down slowly, her heart beating fast, not knowing why, and picked up the paper. It was a note carefully folded. The handwriting was hers, but the style was familiar. It was from Ethan. She felt her legs give way. She opened the paper with trembling fingers. She read slowly, almost unable to form the words. "Mom, if anything happens to me, it was Mark. I saw him with a woman in the car. He said he'd hurt me if I said anything." Laura stopped breathing for a few seconds. The world spun around her. The paper trembled in her hands, the words hitting her like hammer blows to the chest. No, 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 not this. She read it again and again, the same words. If anything happens to me, it was Mark. She fell to her knees on the floor of the room. She cried silently, only the air tearing at her throat, her body moving as if trying to hold itself up. Mark whispered, almost without a voice. No, he didn't look at the note as if it were burning. And at that moment, something inside her broke differently. It was pain, but it was also fear. It was doubt. The floor of her son's room seemed to spin, and in the midst of despair, a cold certainty was born inside her. Something was very wrong. The paper was still between her fingers, half crumpled with her son's shaky handwriting, but clear. Laura read it over and over again, trying to find some mistake, some explanation, some word that would say it was just a silly scare, teenage anger. But it wasn't. Mark, the man who slept with her, the same man who made coffee while she showered, who laughed with Ethan while watching movies on the couch, fell to his knees on the bedroom carpet. His body felt as heavy as a stone. The note fell to the floor, and she stared at it as if it were a knife in her chest. She tasted salt in her mouth. Her breathing became shallow. The world spun around her, but she couldn't move. Her hands clenched her chest, as if trying to stop her heart from jumping out of her mouth. My God, no, this can't be true. She spoke to herself in a low voice, almost like a moan. She began to put the pieces together, the way Mark avoided looking at her in the hospital, the quick, maybe it was my heart. The silence, the coldness, his eyes that didn't really cry. Her heart was screaming one thing, but her head didn't want to accept it. They had been together for almost 8 years. Mark took care of Ethan when his dad left, taking him to and from school. They played video games together. There were photos, videos, hugs, laughter. But there was the harsh, cruel note that left no room for doubt. He said he would hurt me if I said anything. The blood drained from her fingertips. Her whole body was shaking. He didn't know what to think or feel. It was a mixture of disgust, fear, despair, and guilt. A guilt that hurt more than anything else. He swallowed hard, picked up the note again, and staggered out of the room. He went to the living room, grabbed his cell phone with trembling hands, opened his address book, found the police number, and could almost not dial it. When the call came through, she took a while to speak. "Please, please, I need help." Her voice failed her. "It's about my son and my husband. I found a note from my son. He said his stepfather threatened him. Please, you have to come. I don't know what to do." The girl on the other end asked her to calm down. She said they would send someone, but Laura could hardly hear her anymore. The cell phone fell to the couch. She stood there with the note in her hand and her soul in pieces. She no longer knew who to trust. She only knew one thing. The fear was now real, and it was inside her own home. She took a deep breath, took out the paper, her hands shaking, got up slowly, and walked towards the police station quickly without anyone seeing her leave. Harris was the police officer who attended to her. He was a man with a firm gaze, unhurried in his speech. He greeted her with a slight nod, and she just handed him the paper without saying anything. He grabbed it, read it slowly twice, didn't say a word for several seconds. Laura could only whisper, This was in my son's drawer. He wrote this earlier." Harris looked at her firmly, but not harshly. "Do you have any idea when he wrote it?" "No, but he knew something. And now he's out there at the funeral home, alone, lifeless." The police officer took a deep breath, put the note in a plastic bag, and spoke calmly. "We're going to investigate, Mrs. Laura, but it's difficult to prove anything right now." Even more so with he hesitated, with the apparent cause being heart failure. But he was healthy. He was strong. This doesn't make sense. Her voice came out louder than she wanted, but it was pain, pure pain. Harris nodded slowly with understanding. "I know, and we're going to do everything right, but we need more than a note. Do you understand?" She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. She understood, but she didn't accept it. Her head was full of questions, assumptions, memories, things that had seemed small before, but now seemed giant. What if? What if he did something to my son? She asked, almost begging for an answer. "We'll find out, trust me." Doubt now shared space with pain, a mother torn between mourning and suspicion. And all she wanted was to know the truth. Laura sat on the edge of her son's bed, the room still smelling like him. Everything there seemed frozen in time. The lamp was on, his backpack was in the corner, his keychain was hanging on the desk, and there on the pillow was Ethan's cell phone. She looked at it as if it were a bomb about to explode. She picked it up carefully. Her heart was beating fast, her hands were shaking. She needed an answer, anything, a clue, a warning, a sign. She tried to unlock it. Password screen. She sighed deeply. She thought, tried his birthday. Nothing. She tried his biological father's date of birth and death. Nothing. That's when she looked down at the floor and saw Lupo, the family dog, lying there, looking up at her with sad eyes. It was like a spark. Ethan loved that dog. He said he was his four-legged brother. She tried 097, July 9th, the day they adopted Lupo. The screen unlocked. She closed his eyes. His chest jumped. He went straight to his messages, opened the app, swiped carefully, saw normal conversations with schoolmates, memes, videos, but then he stopped at a name. Louise opened it. The conversation was recent, very recent, and what he read sent a chill down his spine. "Man, what you saw is really intense. Take care of yourself, brother. That guy is dangerous. Are you home right now? Let me know if he comes near you. Ethan, don't play with that. Get ready." Laura ran her hand across her forehead. Her heart was already racing, but then the last audio message arrived. She pressed the button. Her son's voice filled the room, a tense, low voice, almost a whisper. He saw me looking. Does she know about your lover? He got weird. Really weird. If anything happens, it was him. Tell my mum, but I'm going to find a way to tell her without it hurting her so much. She covered her mouth, unable to hold back the tears. Her son's voice, that tone of fear, that warning. She played the audio once, twice, 3 times, as if she wanted to memorize every word. Laura covered her mouth, unable to hold back the tears. Her son's voice, that tone of fear, that warning. She played the audio once, twice, 3 times, as if she wanted to store every word in her heart. My God, my son, she whispered. The cell phone slipped from her hands and fell onto the bed. Her world, which was already broken, now seemed to have fallen apart completely. She knew deep down Ethan was trying to warn her, and now there in that room, in that suffocating loneliness, she felt the most cruel pain of all, that of not having listened before. Laura sat there on the edge of the bed, her son's cell phone in her hands, her eyes red, her face wet with tears. Her head was spinning, her chest hurt, and the silence in the room was so heavy that it seemed to scream. She went back to the audio gallery. One had not been listened to. It had no blue arrow or sign that anyone had clicked on it. It was there, hidden among the messages with Louise. A file of a few seconds recorded with his cell phone, probably in his pocket or backpack. She hesitated for a second. Her finger hovered over the play button. She took a deep breath and pressed it. The voice that came out of the cell phone was not her son's. It was Mark's. It wasn't the Mark she knew. It wasn't the quiet man who made her coffee in the mornings. It was a tense, angry, threatening voice. You're not going to say anything, or things are going to go very badly for you. Do you understand? Pause. Laura felt the blood freeze in her veins. If I get my hands on you, I'll beat you to a pulp, you little brat. You don't understand anything. If your mum finds out, I'll kill her too. Silence. The audio ended like that, defenseless, without a response. Just that tone full of threats and contained violence. She was in shock. The cell phone fell into her lap. Her whole body was shaking. No, it can't be. But it was. That was Mark, and that was his voice. It was unmistakable. It was the way he spoke, his accent, his rhythm. It was him. Laura brought her hands to her head as if she could tear it out of her memory, but she couldn't. It was already part of her. It was recorded inside her. The image of her frightened son hearing that, recording secretly, trying to protect himself. Everything was mixed up in her mind. She jumped up, paced around the room, threatened Ethan. My God, he threatened my son. The wall seemed to close in on her. The floor was moving. Her heart wanted to jump out of her chest. Every part of the life she thought she knew was falling apart. And all that was left was the echo of that cruel voice repeating, "If I catch you, I'll beat you up." She knew what she had to do. She knew she couldn't hesitate any longer. Now it was real. And more than ever, she had to fight for her son, even if he wasn't there to defend himself. The day was cloudy. A cold wind blew in Laura's face as she walked toward the simple house where Louise, Ethan's friend, lived. Ethan. The rusty iron gate creaked as she pushed it open. She clapped her hands with the note still folded in her pocket, her heart pounding. A grey-haired woman with a tired look came to the door. It was the boy's grandmother. "Good afternoon. Are you Louise's grandmother?" "Yes, my daughter." "And who are you?" Laura swallowed hard. Her eyes were already filling with tears. "I'm Ethan's mother." The woman looked down, ran her hand over her face, clearly affected. "Oh my God, Ethan, I found out just a little while ago. How sad, isn't it? Such a good, sweet boy." Laura nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. She looked around as if expecting to see the boy come out from around a corner. "Do you know where Louise is? I really need to talk to him. It's important." The grandmother hesitated. Then she took a step forward, her body huddled against the cold. "My daughter isn't here. She disappeared yesterday morning. She said she was going on a trip with some friends for a week, but I don't know." Hey, he was acting strange, scared, very quiet. He was looking around as if he was waiting for something to happen. He hugged me tightly before he left, which he never does. Laura felt a shiver down her spine. Was he afraid of something? Yes, he was. And he didn't mean that I asked him. I insisted, and he just said, "If anyone asks, say I went on a trip. I stayed with the heavy heart." I felt that something was wrong. Laura took the note out of her pocket carefully. She handed it to the lady. He knew. My son wrote this before his voice broke. The woman read it slowly. With each line, her expression changed, her eyes filled with tears. Holy God! She brought her hand to her mouth, her fingers trembling. I knew. I knew there was something. Luis always talked about Ethan's stepfather. He said that man was strange, that Ethan was afraid, but I thought it was just a kid exaggerating. Laura grabbed the woman's hands and squeezed them tightly. If he knows anything, anything at all, I need to know, please. The grandmother nodded, but her gaze said it all. The boy left because he was afraid of something big. She turned off her cell phone, everything, and now those who remained had to piece together the fragments of a truth that still hurt just to touch. The wind blew strongly, and in that silence between two mothers, one with a hidden son, the other with a son almost lost, all that remained was pain and the silent promise that nothing would be ignored anymore. The wind blew harder, and in that silence between two mothers, one with a hidden son, the other with a son she had almost lost, only the pain and the silent promise that nothing would be ignored remained. Laura returned home with her heart even more heavy. Every word's grandmother had said ran through her head like a warning. The gate creaked behind her, and the silence of the house enveloped her. It was the same silence as always, but now it brought something different. A kind of fear she had never felt before. Fear of looking back and seeing that everything she had experienced with Mark was a lie. She climbed the stairs slowly, entering Ethan's room as if she were stepping into a sacred place. She sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the desk, the crumpled pillow, the headphones hanging in the corner, and there on the dresser was the cell phone, the same one where she had found the messages and audio files. She picked up the device carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure. She knew there could still be something there. She opened the folders, photos, videos, files. Some were short, others long. She looked through them without blinking until she found a folder with a simple name. Things. She opened it. There was only one video. Laura pressed play. The image moved a little, as if someone had recorded it secretly. And there, in front of the camera, clearly visible, Mark was sitting in a black car with a young girl next to him, with her hair tied up in a messy bun, a thin face and a nervous expression. She must have been in her 20s. Mark was approaching her. He spoke softly with anger. At first you couldn't hear the sound very well, but you could see the girl's face getting smaller, and then he kissed her quickly. Laura's heart stopped forcibly. Her hands began to sweat. In the video, the girl was trying to say something. She pointed to her belly, and that's when it became clear. She was pregnant. Her belly was already visible. Mark responded with a look that Laura knew well. That fake smile. While his eyes didn't smile, and suddenly he grabbed her arm tightly. Her expression changed instantly. Fear. Pure fear. The image was shaking even more now. The video ended abruptly. Laura was in shock. The cell phone fell from her lap to the floor, but she didn't move. She brought her hands to her mouth with her eyes wide open. No, it couldn't be. It was true. Everything, every bit of that pain now made sense. Mark had another woman, a young woman who was pregnant with his child, and he was being aggressive, cruel, and Ethan. Ethan had seen it. She bent over her knees and cried. She cried like someone who feels like the world is falling apart again. But now, along with the pain came anger, certainty. Her son hadn't made it up. He knew too much. And maybe that was why they had silenced him. Alone in the boy's room, Laura swore to herself that she would not remain silent. Not anymore. The afternoon of that horrible day arrived heavy, windless, soundless. Her thoughts were far away, lost in the video, in the note, in the audio recordings. Everything inside her was boiling, but on the outside she had to be calm. She had to pretend for now. She heard the key turning in the door. Her heart began to beat faster. Mark came in as if nothing had happened. He took off his jacket, threw it on the couch, and spoke in a soft, almost rehearsed voice. "I'm exhausted, Isa. Today was really tough." She forced a half smile. He looked at her, trying to understand something with his eyes. But Laura turned her face away. She couldn't look at him. If he saw her looking at him, he would notice. He would feel it. "You're acting weird," he said, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "Just tired." "Did you go to the funeral home again?" "Yes, I wanted to spend some more time with him alone." Mark took a sip of water and looked at her over the rim of his glass. "Are you sleeping?" "More or less." Silence. He sat down on the couch, ran his hand over his face, and stayed there staring into space. Laura went back to the kitchen, dried a cup, pretending to go through a routine that no longer existed. She stood with her back to him, listening to his every step through the house until he asked, "Where's your cell phone?" She tensed up. "It's charging in my room. Can I use it for a minute?" "Mine doesn't have a signal again." "Sure," she replied, trying to sound normal. She walked to the hallway, entered the room, and left the device on the dresser. She left immediately, went to the bathroom, and closed the door. She turned on the water, but instead of washing up, she stood silently, leaning against the door, listening to rapid footsteps on the other side. Mark entered the room, moved the cell phone, the screen unlocked. He knew her password. Laura could imagine his fingers sliding, opening folders, searching, but there was nothing there anymore. The call to the police had been deleted. And then silence, a heavier silence. She took a deep breath. Time seemed to stand still. After a few minutes, he came out of the room, his face different, more serious, trying to look normal, but the look in his eyes was no longer the same. It was as if something inside him had woken up, something that had been hidden before. "I'm going to take a shower," he said without looking at her. "Okay," she replied, still pretending. But inside she knew he had seen it. And now the game was going to change. She opened Ethan's cell phone, gathered everything together, the note, the video, the audio recording of the conversation, the messages with Louise. She selected them one by one, typed Harris's number and pressed send. Minutes later, he sent a message back. "Mrs. Laura, can you see me tonight before the wake?" "Sure, please, but it has to be in secret." "Mark is here." The message notifying him that he had arrived sounded before 7 p.m. "I'll sit down." Harris saw Mark leave with a notebook, his gaze steady, unhurried. He sat down at the kitchen table, took off his glasses, and remained silent for a while, listening again to the audio recordings on his own cell phone. Laura on the other side of the table was barely breathing. "It's serious," he said in a heavy voice. "This note is very serious. The video and this audio here." He paused and played the part again, where Mark spoke angrily. With each word, Laura felt her stomach churn. Harris looked her in the eyes. "But we still need more, Donna. We have clues, but no hard evidence. Everything points to him." "Yes, but if he gave something to his son, if he used some kind of substance, we have to find out what it was and where it is. Did he give his son anything to eat or drink?" Laura shook her head, her hands clenched together. "She gave Ethan some juice the day before. He was too quiet afterwards. Different. That juice can get the glass something." She closed her eyes, trying to remember. The image of the glass in the sink came back clearly. She had passed by it several times without thinking anything of it. But now I think it is. I think it's still there. In the laundry room, Sink Harris got up immediately. "Show me." They went together to the back of the house. There was the forgotten glass, a little dirty, with a lip mark on the rim. She pointed with her finger. It was this one. The detective took a glove out of his backpack, put it on carefully, picked up the glass and put it in a small bag. "We'll send this to the lab. It could be the missing piece." Laura nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Harris, I need to know the truth. I need to save my son, even if it's too late." He touched her shoulder respectfully. "You've already started saving him, Laura. Now leave it to us. We'll see it through to the end." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath for the first time in days. She felt a spark of hope in the air, small, fragile, but alive. The night before, the worst day of her life. She was in the bedroom folding Ethan's clothes. She had already made dinner as usual, chicken and rice. Ethan had come home from school, tired but in a good mood. She remembers him throwing his backpack on the couch, laughing about something silly his friends had done. Mark was in the kitchen doing something. Laura heard him say in a calm voice, "Ethan, do you want some juice?" "Oh, Peach, it's nice and cold." "Yes, I'd like some. Thanks, Mark." She didn't even think about it at the time. It was something they always did. They always offered each other things, looked out for one another. But now the memory was clearer. Ethan had taken the juice and sat in the living room with his feet up on the couch watching TV. Then he went up to his room and stayed there quietly, which was rare for him. She even commented later to Mark, "That's strange. Ethan went to bed early today, didn't he? He's too quiet." And Mark replied without looking her in the eye, "He must be tired. No, they say teenagers grow by sleeping." At the time, Laura laughed. She didn't see anything wrong, but now that glass of juice was something else. Minutes later, the front gate opened. It was Mark. He entered slowly, carrying a bag of flowers. His eyes were sunken, his beard was unshaven, and his hair was tousled as if he wanted to look exhausted. But Laura noticed there was something different about him. The way he walked, the way he looked at the house. He crossed the living room without saying a word. He saw the kitchen, the empty sink, the washed dishes. Then he looked at Laura, who was sitting in the armchair, motionless. His gaze rested on her for a few seconds, and there it was. It wasn't pain. It wasn't sadness. It was control, coldness, a hard, silent look that tried to understand how much she knew. It was as if he was measuring her every breath, every silence. "Did you get some rest?" he asked, as if he just wanted to make conversation. "A little." "Yes," she replied without emotion. Inside, her stomach was churning. She knew those words had no feeling. They were an act, a script already written. Mark was still there, close by, but he was a different person. Now his every gesture seemed planned, every word thought out, and that only confirmed what her heart was already screaming. He was watching, trying to keep control of everything, and something in him knew that the net was closing in. Time passed quickly, and it was already time for the wake, the day no mother should ever have to live through. A day without logic, without justice, only pain. She climbed the stairs slowly, ran her fingers along the wooden banister, reached the door to Ethan's room, and stopped. She rested her forehead against it, closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open carefully. The room was the same, the curtains half open, the lamp off, the bed made, or almost. She walked over to the closet and opened it with both hands. The blue shirt she had set aside earlier was there, folded on the top shelf, the one he always chose when he wanted to look his best. As she said, it was a light blue with simple buttons, but it made his eyes look brighter. When she pulled the shirt out, the fabric gave off a smell that made Laura stop. It was her son's cologne. It wasn't strong, it was soft. A mixture of soap, cheap cologne, and youth. That smell of a clean, smiling, lively boy. His smell brought the shirt to her face. She pressed it against her chest and stood there still, breathing slowly. She closed her eyes as if she wanted to freeze the moment, as if at that moment he were there with her, just the same as always, smiling with his hair tousled, complaining about getting up early. "Oh, my love, my boy." The words came out softly, almost a whisper. Her legs weakened. She almost fell, but she took another deep breath. She dried her face with the sleeve of her blouse and stood up with the shirt in her hands. It didn't matter what had happened. It didn't matter how much it hurt. She was going all the way for her son. For the truth, for the last time, she was going to dress him with care, with love, like when he was little. And she put his school uniform on while he ate bread and butter. She left the room slowly, but with something different in her eyes. The pain was still there, but now, along with it, there was strength. The funeral parlor was quiet, very quiet. People entered silently, placing flowers next to the coffin with their eyes downcast. Some cried softly, others just looked on, unable to say anything. The light in the room was yellow and soft, and the smell of flowers mixed with the weight of mourning filled the air. Laura arrived with her blue shirt folded in her arms, her eyes fixed on the floor. It seemed as if her body was being moved by another force. It wasn't her walking, it was the pain that carried her. She passed by friends, neighbors, relatives. No one interrupted her, no one had the courage to speak. She approached the coffin, placed the shirt on the lid, took a deep breath with her hands trembling. She asked the funeral home employee to open it. He nodded respectfully and opened it slowly. There was Ethan, his face calm, pale, but at peace, as if he were asleep in a deep sleep, his hair combed to the side, his mouth closed, his face exactly as she remembered it. Laura approached, placed her fingers on his forehead and paused. What had been ice now felt warm. She opened her eyes wide. Her heart leapt. He's warm. She touched his skin again, his face, his cheeks. It couldn't be. She placed her hand on his chest, and then she felt it. A faint movement, but real. His chest rose. Then it fell, then rose again. Ethan whispered, moved closer, put his ear to his son's chest. "Ethan, my love." And then came the scream, a broken, desperate scream filled with everything she had endured for days. "He's alive. My son is alive. Help! Help!" People jumped up in fright. Some ran. Others stood still, not understanding. A woman threw her bag on the floor. A man spilled water on his feet. Screams. Sliding door. Someone call an ambulance, police. The funeral home worker approached, turning pale. He's breathing. My God. The chaos turned into clamor. The entire room was a single sound. Hope, despair, miracle. Minutes later, the ambulance arrived. 2 paramedics ran to the coffin. One put an oximeter on Ethan's finger. The other carefully opened his eyes. He checked his pupils. "He's in a deep state, but he's alive," said one of them. Laura fell to her knees, her hands on her face, tears streaming down uncontrollably. My God, thank you. Thank you." Someone held her by the shoulders. She didn't see who. She just felt the warmth returning to the world. After days of being frozen, something was burning inside her. And it was life. "My son, my boy, you're back. You're back to me." The ambulance siren cut through the air like a knife. Laura sat next to the stretcher, holding Ethan's cold hand with her face pressed against his shoulder. She couldn't take her eyes off his chest, which rose and fell slowly. She whispered softly, as if he could hear her, "Stay with me, my love. Stay with Mommy. Don't leave again, please." At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Doctors were running around. Lights were flashing. Voices were shouting. They took Ethan straight to the emergency room. Laura stayed outside, sitting on a cold metal bench. Her hands were clenched, her heart was pounding, and her body was still in shock. Everything was happening so fast, but at the same time it seemed like time had stopped. After what seemed like an eternity, a doctor came out of the room. His coat was wrinkled, and he had deep, dark circles under his eyes, like someone who has seen it all. He approached Laura calmly, crouched down in front of her, and in a firm but kind voice said, "He's alive. He's responding." But she held her breath. "But what, doctor?" The police reports came out. He ingested a substance that causes the body to slow down so much that it appears to be dead. Very strong, very precise. It's as if he's been put to sleep very deeply. It lasts about 12 hours in the body. Laura covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes filled with tears instantly. A poison. A sedative, probably mixed with some liquid, but we still don't know what. She fell to her knees on the floor, her face against her own chest. She cried like someone who had let out everything she had been holding in for days. "My son, my boy, my baby." The doctor put his hand on her shoulder. "He's fighting. His heart is strong. He's going to need time, but he's here with you." Laura closed her eyes. The tears flowed freely. She repeated in a low voice, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Because at that moment, the pain, the doubt, the fear no longer mattered. All that mattered was that Ethan was alive, still weak, still far away, but alive, and that was all that mattered. The recovery room was silent, except for the soft sound of the machines, marking the rhythm of life returning. The monitor flashed slowly, steadily. Laura sat next to the bed, holding her son's hand as if she were still afraid to let go, and he would disappear again. She hadn't slept in hours, but her eyes were fixed, attentive, with a mixture of exhaustion, love, and hope. Ethan's face was still pale, but he had more color than when they found him. His lips were parted, his breathing soft, alive. She ran her fingers carefully through his hair, as she did when he was little and had a fever. "I'm here, my love. Mommy's here." And then none. And then he moved. First a sigh, then his eyes slowly opened. Laura froze. The world stopped. Ethan, his eyes still looked heavy, a little lost, as if he were trying to understand where he was, what was happening. But he saw his mom. His eyes met hers, and although he didn't speak, there was a sparkle there, a question, an answer, a miracle. He tried to open his mouth, but no sound came out. Just a hoarse, very weak sound. Calm down, my love," Laura whispered, leaning toward him and kissing his sweaty forehead. The kiss lasted longer than normal. She stayed there, feeling the warmth of his skin, his breath, his life. "You're safe, my son. You're safe now. I promise you, no one will ever hurt you again." Ethan closed his eyes slowly, like someone who trusts, like someone who, for the first time in days, can truly rest. And Laura, with her face pressed against his, cried quietly, but it was a different kind of cry. Still in pain, yes, but now with a taste of relief, of a new beginning, of victory. Hours after the scare, the pain and the joy that almost broke Laura's heart, the most difficult moment came. The truth had to come out. It was time for Ethan to talk, to tell everything. Although he was wet, although his voice still trembled, he insisted on doing so. In the hospital observation room, 2 policemen sat down beside him. Harris stood in a corner watching. Laura, sitting on the other side of the bed, held her son's hand tightly. She was there to support him, even if only in silence. Ethan took a deep breath, gathered his strength, and began. "I saw him with a woman, Mark. I was coming from practice, and I passed near Gas Station Avenue. He was in the car kissing her. She was a young, pretty girl, pregnant." He paused, his eyes filled with tears, but he continued. "I got nervous. I didn't know what to do. I told Louise, I told him I was going to tell my mom." The police officer wrote everything down silently, attentive to every word. And then that night, he was very calm. He asked me if I wanted some juice, gave me a glass, and I drank it. After that, I only remember going to bed. I felt my body was heavy. Everything was spinning. I couldn't get up or call for help. After that, just darkness. Laura looked down. Her hands were shaking again. It was like living it all over again, but now with his pain. The police officer nodded and got up. Harris approached and put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You were very brave, kid. Now leave this to us." That same night, the police went out to look for Mark. They already had the video, the audio, the note, the substance in the glass. Now they had the testimony of the person who mattered most. Mark was at home packing his suitcase in a hurry. When he saw the patrol cars arrive, he tried to leave through the back, but he didn't have time. They caught him right there. He wanted to make something up. He stammered. He tried to deny it, but they found 2 hidden bottles in his car, a liquid substance with no label, a strong sedative in the house of his mistress. More truths, men's clothes, notes, photos. At the police station, Mark said nothing. His gaze was cold without repentance, but it didn't matter anymore. It was already done. The gate to the house opened slowly with that familiar creak that Laura had always heard. But now it sounded different. It was as if the gate itself felt the weight of what that house had been through. She went in with Ethan by her side, still walking slowly, each step an effort. Her arm held his tightly, as if she still couldn't believe that her son was there, alive, back, breathing beside her. The afternoon sun streamed softly through the curtains, touching the walls of the living room. Everything was in its place, and at the same time, everything seemed new. When they walked through the door, the first thing they heard was the sound of nails on the floor. Lup. The dog ran toward them, wagging his tail, his eyes shining brightly, as if he had saved that joy just for that moment. He threw himself onto Ethan's legs, crying softly, spinning around, trying to understand if this was real. Ethan knelt down with effort, his legs still weak, but he opened his arms. "Come here, buddy." Lup threw himself into his chest, settling there as if to say, "I waited." Ethan closed his eyes and smiled, a slight smile, but full of things left unsaid. "He stayed with me the whole time, didn't he, Mom?" he said in a weak voice. Laura also crouched down, ran her hand through her son's hair and over the dog's back, her eyes filled with emotion. "He never left the doorway. He slept there on the mat, waiting for you to come back." Ethan was silent for a few seconds, his hand trembling on Lupo's fur, and then he whispered, "I felt it. You know, when I was in that dark place, I could smell him. It was like he was calling me back." Laura pressed her lips together, her chest filled with a love that could no longer fit inside. "It was him, and it was you, son. You wanted to come back, and you did." Lup licked Ethan's face, who laughed softly. It was the most beautiful sound that House had heard in a long time. The return to school was something no one could have imagined experiencing. The hallways, once filled with noise, were silent. That day, the teachers stopped what they were doing. The students dropped their cell phones, and when Ethan appeared at the entrance, accompanied by Laura, everyone's eyes filled with tears. Hearts began to beat faster. It was him in the flesh, alive. He walked slowly, wearing a large sweatshirt. His eyes still a little tired, but his smile said it all. He was alive and back. The first to run was Emily, his best friend from class. She threw herself into his arms and cried as if she could no longer control her body. "I thought I'd never see you again, Ethan. Never again." The other classmates approached, some in silence, others crying, others asking if it was true. There were hugs, cries of relief, people kneeling and thanking God right there in the schoolyard. The teachers came over. The biology teacher, who always scolded him on tests, cried softly. The physical education teacher carried him as if he were his son. And then the principal, Mrs. Walker, walked toward him with slow steps, her eyes filled with tears, her hand on her chest. When she was face to face with Ethan, she didn't say much, just hugged him tight and whispered, "You're a miracle, son. A miracle." Laura watched everything from afar, her hands on her chest, her eyes filled with tears. It was like seeing her son being born again, but now in front of everyone. It was a new beginning. A few days later, she got a call from a television station. They wanted to hear her story. The mother who didn't give up. The woman who felt something beyond logic, sitting in the studio in front of the cameras with the bright lights on her face. Laura spoke in a firm voice but full of emotion. "I'm not a hero. I'm a mom. And a mum feels." I felt that Ethan was still here, that he needed me. My heart was screaming that. And I just kept following my instinct, because when the world says it's over, a mother's love says there's still hope. The reporter was holding back tears. The cameramen looked at each other, moved. The interview made headlines across the country. But Laura didn't want fame. She only wanted one thing: that no mother would ever stop listening to her intuition, because that was what saved her son. That was what prevented the end. And now she knew it. The strength she had inside her. The trial was months later, but for Laura it was as if time had stopped since that first scream in her son's room. She sat in the front row, staring straight ahead with Ethan by her side. Stronger, but still with traces of trauma in his eyes. It was the end of a cycle, but also in some way the beginning of another. Mark entered in handcuffs. His gaze, once full of control, was now that of an empty man. His mistress was also brought in, young, her face expressionless, with a belly already growing with another life. The whole story came to light. The two had planned to take everything from Laura, run away together, and start over in another city with a new life. And Ethan, for discovering everything, was a risk they couldn't afford to take. During the trial, the evidence was heard, the audio recordings, the hidden video, the note, the analyzed glass, the testimonies. The whole truth was exposed, and there was no way to deny it. The prosecutor was direct. They tried to silence a young man. They silenced a son, but they underestimated the strongest thing in this world: the love of a mother. In the end, Mark was convicted, and so was his mistress. Years in prison for both of them. The sentence was handed down in heavy silence, but it was fair. Laura didn't applaud, didn't make a sound, didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Outside, in front of the courthouse, reporters tried to get statements. Laura held Ethan's hand tightly. A journalist asked, "Do you feel that justice has been served now?" Laura looked at the woman, then at her son. Laura looked at the woman, then looked at her son. Yes, justice was done, but nothing is erased. It only heals. You learn to live with the pain, with the scar. But the important thing is that he is here alive, and I am here to take care of him. And with that she turned her back. She walked with Ethan by her side as if to say, it's over for them. But for us, it's just beginning. The pain that almost destroyed Laura became strength, and she decided to turn that strength into something that could reach other women, other mothers, because she knew she wasn't the only one. That somewhere else others were going through the same thing without knowing, without understanding, without being able to cry out for help. That's how the Segundo Suspiro project was born. It started small in a room at the community center with plastic chairs, coffee pots, and simple cake on the table. She invited 3 neighbors. 2 showed up. One of them cried from the door. She said she had never told anyone that her ex-husband had threatened his own son. The other said she had already suspected strange things about her stepson, but thought it was just her imagination. Laura listened with all her heart and told her story, not with anger, but with truth, with firmness. She said, "You feel it. You see it, but sometimes you pretend not to, out of fear, out of shame. But a mother who keeps quiet ends up blaming herself. I almost buried my son, and he was alive. I don't wish that on anyone." The weeks passed and the group grew. It became a meeting every 15 days, then monthly, then a talk at school, then an invitation to the local radio station. And so Laura began to be sought out by women from all over. Some already hurt, others trying to understand if what they were going through was normal. Many afraid. others already without hope. And she taught them, look at how you see it with your son. Pay attention to the silence. See if there is something your heart wants to say, and you insist on keeping quiet. A mother's love is never wrong. The problem is when we doubt ourselves. She spoke simply with affection. No difficult words, no theory. It was experience, it was truth. The name Segundo Suspiro, second breath, came from what she felt at the wake. That moment when life returned, where everything could have ended. But she breathed again, because everyone deserves a second breath. She said, a second chance, an opportunity to truly live without fear. And so Laura transformed her pain into a seed. And with every encounter, every hug, every shared tear, she swed something new. Protection, courage, and hope. The sky was clear that afternoon, and the wind blew softly, bringing the smell of freshly cut grass and children's laughter in the distance. Laura sat on a wooden bench, her arms crossed in her lap, staring straight ahead. The scene in front of her was simple, but to her it was everything. Ethan was running behind Lupo, who was barking excitedly, dodging his feet as if he understood the game. The dog ran around in circles, teasing him, and then ran off again. Ethan laughed, a free, light laugh that she thought she would never hear again. His hair was longer, his face still bore the shadows of what he had been through, but his eyes were alive again. Next to Laura Harris, with her arms crossed, also watched in silence. After a few seconds, she spoke softly, as if not wanting to break the moment. He came back. Laura took a while to answer. She swallowed, took a deep breath, and then said with a smile full of tears in her eyes, he came back to live, and I came back to protect him. Harris looked at her with respect. He knew everything that woman had been through, and he knew that nothing, no prize, no sentence, no recognition could compare to what she was seeing now. Her son running in the park, smiling with the dog, it was just that, but it was everything. Laura leaned back against the bench, exhaled slowly, and stayed there watching, savoring every second like someone who is witnessing a miracle. Because deep down, that was exactly what it was, a miracle, and no one would ever take it away from her again. The pain that almost destroyed Laura turned into strength, and she decided to turn that strength into something that could reach other women, other mothers, because she knew she wasn't the only one. That somewhere else others were going through the same thing, without knowing, without understanding, without being able to cry out for help. That's how the Segundo Suspro was born. It started small in a room at the community center, with plastic chairs, coffee thermoses, and simple cake on the table. She invited 3 neighbors and 2 showed up. One of them cried from the doorway. She said she had never told anyone that her ex-husband had threatened his own son. The other said she had already suspected strange things about her stepson, but thought it was just her imagination. Laura listened with all her heart and told her story, not with anger, but with truth, with firmness. She said, you feel it, you see it, but sometimes you pretend you don't out of fear, out of shame. But a mother who stays silent ends up blaming herself. I almost buried my son and he was alive. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. The weeks passed and the group grew. It became a meeting every 15 days, then monthly, then a talk at school, then an invitation to the local radio station. And so Laura began to be sought out by women from all over. Some already wounded, others trying to understand if what they were going through was normal. Many afraid, others already without hope. And she taught them, look at how you see your son. Pay attention to the silence. See if there is something your heart wants to say, and you insist on keeping quiet. A mother's love is never wrong. The problem is when we doubt ourselves. She spoke with simplicity, with affection, no difficult words, no theory. It was experience. It was truth. The name Second Breath came from what she felt at the wake. That moment when life returned, when everything could have ended. But she breathed again, because everyone deserves a second breath, she said. A second start, a chance to live for real without fear. And so Laura turned her pain into a seed, and with every encounter, every hug, every shared tear, she planted something new: protection, courage, and hope. The sky was clear that afternoon, and the wind blew softly, bringing the smell of freshly cut grass and children's laughter in the distance. Laura sat on a wooden bench, her arms crossed in her lap, staring straight ahead. The scene in front of her was simple, but to her it was everything. Ethan was running behind Lupo, who was barking excitedly, dodging his feet as if he understood the game. The dog ran around in circles, teasing him, and then ran off again. Ethan laughed. It was a free, the light laugh that she thought she would never hear again. His hair was longer, his face still bore the shadows of what he had been through, but his eyes were alive again. Next to Laura Harris, with her arms crossed, also watched in silence. After a few seconds, she spoke softly, as if not wanting to break the moment. He came back. Laura took a while to answer. She swallowed, took a deep breath, and then said with a smile full of tears in her eyes, "He came back to live, and I came back to protect him." Harris looked at her with respect. He knew everything that woman had been through, and he knew that nothing, no prize, no sentence, no recognition could compare to what she was seeing now. Her son running in the park, smiling with the dog. It was just that, but it was everything. Laura leaned back on the bench, let out a slow breath, and stayed there watching, savoring every second, like someone who was witnessing a miracle, because deep down that was exactly what it was. A miracle. And no one could ever take that away from her. If you also believe in the power of a mother's heart, write in the comments that a mother's intuition is never wrong, and share our story with someone you know, so that you too can be part of our growing community.